Welcome to Commercial Property Talk, the podcast where we explore the trends, challenges, and technologies shaping the world of commercial real estate. Today, I'm joined by Mark Knops, founder and CEO of Sketch Labs. Sketch Labs helps startups and growing companies find flexible and managed office space across London. We get into the state of the market right now, what companies are really looking for in flexible space, and where things might be heading. Let's get into it. Mark, great to have you on. You're someone who has a lot of experience in the flexible office market. You're also a young guy who runs your own business. Just talk us through what led you to start Sketch Labs.
Sure. So I'm 33 now and I started my business 8 years ago. And I'm not going to do the maths on a podcast because that will be really embarrassing. And now everyone thinks I'm completely thick. No, I worked for an office provider when I was a bit younger. And it was my first sort of real job. And I was simply just selling office space. And I'm sure some of the viewers will have heard of WeWork, Regis.
Yeah.
Most businesses require office space. And so it was my job to facilitate the sale of that. And it was my first ever sort of corporate job. And so the way that the model works is that someone needs an office. I work on behalf of the landlord and I take them round like an estate agent would and do the deal. But in order to get the leads, we market the space on Google and so on, but we also require leads from brokers. I had no idea what a broker was, and so it was really interesting learning about what they do. And essentially, they find clients, introduce them to landlords, and they get a fee. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, oh, that's quite an interesting business model because they don't own any real estate. They're essentially just estate agents in a way, the middlemen.
Yeah.
I quite like that business model.
Yeah. What's the typical fee they would collect at the time?
10% is the industry standard. So it's 10% of the contract capped at 12 months. So if your monthly rent was 10 grand, the broker would receive £12,000.
Okay. So you were working for the landlord at the time. And essentially what you're saying is this gave you access to secondary sales force that were working on commission only.
Yeah. So we would rely heavily on these brokers to bring us leads. I would then do the deal. And I guess what sort of prompted me to look into the broker side of the world was I was getting like 0.3% commission per deal, as well as my basic. The brokers were receiving 10%. On paper, everything seemed very attractive. I thought, wow, there's money to be made here. So I'm going to go on the broker side. And instead of joining a brokerage, before I did, I interviewed with a few of the big ones. And I just felt like this is still not enough for me. I want to go for this. And so I set up my own brokerage and thought, oh, we're going to be printing money here. This is going to be really straightforward. I've just got to find loads of business. It turns out finding clients is not easy. And so my job very much became a brokerage to a marketing agency. Being a broker is about finding leads and lead generation. Yeah. That's predominantly actually what I do. And then I broker them into different buildings. So my skill set is, yes, I'm very knowledgeable and the best that I can be in my industry at property, but I'm a lead generation marketing guru.
Yeah.
At the core.
What does lead generation actually look like in practice to you?
Yeah, it's do you know what? It's something I've come to terms with. There is no concrete answer because the real estate of marketing changes every bloody minute. And so it's very difficult to keep tabs on how to go about finding business. But what does lead generation mean to me? It's as simple as me just networking and finding someone who needs an office space. The thing I like about office space is that most businesses require an office, and it's a very straightforward question. Do you need it? Yes or no? No, I don't need it. Will you ever need it in the future? Yes. Okay, when? And so building a pipeline is very straightforward rather than trying to sell a hard sell of, stationery into an office where people will go, we just don't need that sort of thing.
How do you actually find those people though? Because I'd imagine you're operating in quite a competitive space. So how do you deal
hard
with that versus, say, the other brokerage firm that may be chasing the same person?
It's really changed from when I started. So when I started, which was during COVID, most people would think, oh, that would have been the death of my business because everyone's working from home. And without COVID, I think my business would have failed because all the competition became irrelevant. Everyone was going through this sort of moment of we're all earning nothing and property is on its knees. And so I had to find a different way to find clients, because the traditional way is SEO and just ranking on Google, ad spend, that's it. And going through legacy databases. Well, I didn't have a legacy database, so I couldn't afford to put any money into Google ad spend. So I couldn't do that. LinkedIn was very different in COVID to what it is now. And so there was not much ad spend going on LinkedIn, not that I did that, but influencers of LinkedIn, and I hate comparing myself to an influencer, but I am an influencer of the real estate space. I realized that there was an opportunity for someone to have a voice and to do something different. So I built up a following and just started posting a lot about mental health in the workspace, and people had a common talking point about mental health during COVID and how it impacts us in our day-to-day lives, especially in the working world. And so it resonated with a lot of people. And so I built up my following to 18,000 people. And that is why Sketch was so successful. As soon as the restrictions were lifted for the 100th time from Boris Johnson, who kept going back on his word. But I was able to build up a pipeline throughout COVID for free by just posting about relevant topics and asking questionnaires saying, would people need an office when they return back? What would that new way of working look like for them? Built a pipeline. And then as soon as the restrictions were lifted, I was able to just hit the phone and just go for it. And because I'm so young to this industry, I don't need that much. I just needed one deal for this to work. So my first deal was £1,000, and it was like I hit the jackpot, even though that is a tiny deal. And from there, we just built it up.
Could you tell us a bit more about the £1,000 deal?
It was, do you know what? Yeah, it was, so I had a co-founder at the time, and it was her boyfriend.
Okay, right.
They had a photography studio, and they were looking for something in Parsons Green in London. And so I found this little place, and yeah, it was like 400 square foot, tiny little place, and it works perfectly for them. And I believe they're still there because it's so cheap and it just ticks the boxes. But that, from doing that, I learned that, oh, okay, this isn't the sort of deal I want to be brokering in the future. I want to be going after the corporates because that's where the money's at. Yeah. And so that's what I do now. I niched myself into tech startups and scale-ups because as they need to find bigger office space, so does my commission. Yeah. So it's worked really well.
And like me, you're also a serving reservist. How do you sort of balance that with running the business? Because obviously I'm aware of the commitment you have to give, but there can be short notice requirements that you have to see to. How do you normally deal with that?
Yeah, truth be told, it's just been very difficult. This is my third branch of the armed forces that I've served in. I had to make the decision, do I go full steam with my business or do I take a step back from the business and continue with the armed forces? And I had to make a decision there and then, and I decided, let's go with the business. I can try and pick up the military again, even though, as you know, it is not a straightforward process. It's years just to train to get into whatever branch you want to do. So now I'm in a position where Sketch has got to a really good place, which is nice. And so I do have the time to put into the armed forces. I'm in logistics, I'm a mover. So we send freight around the world, fly out with it and stay in those lovely hotels and get paid for it. It's brilliant. I don't get deployed as such like you might do in the Navy. We do something called taskings, which are like a weekend. We'll fly out to Vegas or Australia or wherever. It's intense, but it's not demanding in terms of, right, you're going to do 6 months in Afghan or wherever. I'm allowed my mobile phone on me. It's great. I can respond to emails. It's great because it's not an infantry role. What I love about the RAF is they look for people with skill sets that they can incorporate into that job. If you've run a business, if you're good at accounting, if you're good with people, they're like, how can we benefit from that? Because we want people who have skill sets, because if Mark's great with people, well, then he should be leading the team, or he'd be a good 2IC, second in command, to a good deputy, just to bounce off.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Yeah. So Jumping back, because you mentioned about how your focus is very much on tech. Are you seeing most of the demand then in London, or do you do anything
Yeah.
outside of the M25 too?
No. When I started the company, the goal was to go global and to be able to operate everywhere, and starting with the UK. And so within the first 3 years, we tried to branch out to the UK, and the amount of work we put in for the same process doesn't pay the same in Manchester than it does in London. London is one of the most expensive places in the world to have an office. It's just fact. It's really expensive. And to the listeners, to give them an idea on how much an office costs, you can pay anywhere from £600 to £1,800 per person for an office. If you've got a 20-person office, which isn't a big office, it's kind of a lot of money. So I decided that just niching ourselves into London office property experts would be a good bet. I mean, there are other countries like Dubai. I've always felt like Dubai would be a cool place to do it. But London's our bread and butter, and I don't see that changing, to be honest.
With that in mind, how would you sort of describe the state of the flex and the co-working market in London right now?
Complete shambles.
Okay.
It's just so unpredictable. It's all over the place. So there's so many humble bragging business owners who are trying to fly the flag for office space, saying that this is how it's going to be in the future. And so it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen because of the amount of noise. And so what's predictable is the unpredictable, essentially. There's a lot of office providers popping out the woodwork on a weekly basis. It's very hard to keep tabs of it. And it's the same as brokers. So you've got the WeWorks. WeWork's just the biggest global, Regis, IWG. Then you've got Fora. Then you have the really cool boutique office providers like 25 Eccleston Square, Second Home, Uncommon. Each one has their own spin of what they offer and are very unique and different. And then you have the brokers who have to bring them the business, and they are always trying to enter the market with a USP, just like me. The biggest mistake is that everyone soon gets humbled that brokers don't have a USP. They just have a different set of clients, and you've got to manage those clients and be really good at your job and just be exceptional to work with. I'm not going to tell you that I'm different to CBRE, although they would argue that they are. But we both do the same job. I don't have a USP. I'm just really good at what I do. But the actual market is just, the reason I said it was a shambles is because it changes far too quickly. And so when you're a broker and you're trying to put marketing spend and trying to think how you're going to go about marketing, do we do automation? Do we hire an influencer? Do we do a lot of PR, tube ads? There's no knowing what's going to work. So you're constantly testing and testing and testing. And at the same time, there's so much development going on. None of this is a bad thing, by the way, because it's challenging. And for some people, it's really exciting because it means that it doesn't become boring at all. But what it does mean is that for the brokers and providers that provide a very same service and who aren't able to adapt quickly will get swallowed up and go out of business. And that's why you're seeing so many newcomers on the scene on a daily basis, because the old ones go out of business, the new ones come in, buy that business, take on the lease. It's quite exhausting.
And what do you think is causing that churn, I guess? Is it, just the cost of living has created this completely untenable position that we're in, that businesses just don't know, especially at that stage of the journey?
I've got it's a really interesting question. I've got a very controversial answer.
Okay, go ahead.
It's my opinion. I think a lot of people put blame on the government, war, cost of living, so on, so on. There's a million and one reasons not to do something or to fail at something. But I think the biggest challenge at the moment is marketing because of AI and how people receive marketing. So the old ways were you hit the phones, you have a database, you do email marketing, so on. I feel like there's been such a bottleneck now and people don't respond to those old methods of marketing, SEO, so on. Now you've got to absolutely be the first person on Google in order to capture leads, or you've got to have an influencer of some sort generating a lot of traffic. So the expenditure is now through the roof. So if you're a small player trying to get into the game, you've got to come into the industry with a very unique creative angle. So you're seeing a lot of really cool things happening. You're seeing businesses literally fly within their first year and you go, that's not normal. And you see so many people coming in, doing it the spiel, chatter, then you don't hear from them ever again. They're just dead because they couldn't find the business, because it's so easy to be ignored nowadays. And I think it doesn't matter what industry you're in, just to be heard is the biggest challenge. I don't know how people work full-time with a marketing agency because it's so difficult. Finding leads, lead generation, my God, if someone, can find a piece of gold to that answer, I don't know. And a lot of people are outsourcing all of this challenge to AI, which is providing back absolutely crap answers. ChatGPT is not the answer. Claude, in my opinion, is an aid. All these things are an aid, but there's the amount of messages I get on a daily basis from people saying, oh, I've got a marketing agency which will 10x your pipeline, blah, blah, blah. How on earth would they know that that's even possible? And it's just nonsense, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. And one of the, I suppose, the other angles to that is that AI, I suppose, enables, let's say, a solo player that's new to the market to seek out information and to deliver certain types of marketing much quicker than they may have otherwise been able to do. So, for example, you could go onto ChatGPT and prompt it to produce certain output that you want, whether that's social media posts or whatever it might be. I guess the challenge is maintaining that and knowing how effective that's really going to be.
Yeah. And by the way, I use AI on a daily basis. I use Claude, I use ChatGPT.
Yeah.
It is really good. I sadly don't need a PA anymore. I used to hire a PA over in South Africa and she was the absolute best person in the world. But would I hire another PA again? I just don't need to, because now I get instant answers. It's great. But I think people are relying too much on AI to solve their business model and do the work for them. And it's not the solution.
What do you think is the future for brokers with AI, the growth of AI?
So at the moment, we are seeing an uprising in brokers creating AI softwares for the end user to use so that they don't have to use a broker. If I can give you an example.
Please do, yeah.
So back in the day, the way that my industry works is that you have the client, they go to a broker, they then go to the landlord. It's client goes to ChatGPT. It's a load of misinformation, load of rubbish, then goes to the broker, then probably decides, no, I won't go to the broker, and then goes direct to the landlord. The whole structure of how it works is up in the air, and it's so frustrating because I get leads coming to me saying, well, I know there's an office in WeWorks, blah, blah, and it's for this amount. And I go, I'm sorry, but it's not, because that information isn't made publicly available. WeWork might say that there's an office in Chancery Lane and prices start at £400 a desk. And ChatGPT will take that information, and then the end user will have an inaccurate response, and it's just painful. Where's it going now, though? Well, brokers have realized maybe there's a quick buck to be made from creating softwares that are like ChatGPT, but specifically for the office world, and they sync to live availabilities in the industry, which were not publicly available anymore. So you could go on this software and go, oh, I'm just looking for a 5-person office, and it will tell you exactly what you want to find. Kind of like Rightmove, but way more advanced than Rightmove or Zoopla or anything like residential-wise. And you know what? It's scary because these softwares are really good, but it doesn't solve the issue of the amount of conversations you've got to have with the landlord if you're the end user. If I can give you a bit more context to that, because that might not make sense. So if I'm trying to find an office and I'm speaking to 5 different landlords, and I run a business, my whole life is going to be consumed by talking to salespeople who are quite frankly doing my head in, trying to do a deal with me, and I just need to run my business. So what these softwares don't solve is taking the hassle out of everything. They give you the right information. You don't have to pay any fees, agency fees, of which there are in my industry, but I don't charge fees. We're completely free. So actually, I'm finding it's something to talk about, and it's something that I'm able to offer and advertise, that we do the full 360. You need an office, tell us what you need, we'll find it. You're never going to speak to anyone but Market Sketch Labs, because I handle all those conversations, making your life simple. You just focus on your business and I'm going to get you a deal and an office that you're going to love working in. It's as simple as that.
You mentioned London is or has become a very expensive city, which is a given. What's a typical tech firm paying then, in terms of they pay by desk price in your market? What's typical, and how has that changed over the last few years?
So the tech firms are the ones with the money, because they've got the investment and going through their seed rounds. So it's difficult to put a number on it, but I would give you a few examples. I can say all of the tech companies I've ever worked with have had a lot of investment, minimum 5 million, even before they've even got an office space. They usually start off with a 4-person office, which is costing them next to nothing. And they then secure their funding and they go straight up, usually to 20 or 30-person office, really high growth. And you're looking between 15 to 40,000 pounds a month for that first office, like proper office.
Okay, this is for the 20-person office.
Yeah. I was going to say, to give you an example, I did a 40-person office, which made me £64,000 in commission just from one deal for a 40-person office.
Impressive, yeah.
It's impressive, yeah.
Could you tell us a bit more about where that was and who the client was?
I won't tell you who the client was, but they're a Turkish tech company, basically an alternative to OnlyFans, believe it or not.
Oh, right.
And really disrupting that space. Okay. Loads of cash, and they needed a 40-person office in Aldgate. And so I hooked them up with a company called Business Cube, which is kind of like a serviced office provider, but they have traditional leases. And what they do is they approach the traditional landlords and they say, I know you've got this dead space, we're going to refurb it, offer it out to a client on a flexible basis. And the client then gets an entire floor with their own breakout space, kitchens, UCs, and everything, all within their demise. Whereas the original sort of serviced aspect was, you take just an office with, say, 40 desks, but there's nothing else in the room. And then you use the shared facilities in the building, exactly how a WeWork operates. And so companies now, as they're growing, and specifically tech companies who need a lot of facilities, amazing Wi-Fi, incredible infrastructure, they need to be able to scale very quickly. Sometimes on a yearly basis, they can double in size, and they don't want their office to be the reason they can't grow. So going down the managed route managed is the term. You have a managed self-contained office, and it's sort of in between private traditional lease and service. And so that's where I'm niching Sketch Labs. We're targeting those tech companies who want those self-contained big floors, and they need it on a yearly basis to increase. And we're seeing the demand for that at the moment is outweighing anything else. You know, private lease, serviced offices, small offices. And so the way I go about generating my leads is I have made a lot of effort to get in touch with those VCs, the angel investors. My network is investment type people going through referrals, and it's a lot of graft, but it means that Mark's the guy. Oh yeah. Yeah. If you need an office, we've got a tech company, go speak to Mark.
Why would they, why not go traditional lease route? Because obviously when you reach a certain, let's say, if it was £600 a desk, you've got 10 staff, that's £6,000 a month. Would it not make sense to then go to a traditional lease? I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Yeah. What's the sort of tipping point, I guess, if any, where a company will say, hey, this just doesn't make financial sense for us anymore. We're going to now go and have a look for a traditional private lease.
Yeah, it's all down to cost. So a traditional lease is much cheaper, but you will be tied into an agreement for 5 years. It is just the wrong thing to do if you want to grow your company at scale quickly.
Okay.
So look at it in sort of 3 ways. You have serviced offices, you have managed in the middle, and then you have traditional. So depending on where you are with your company's journey, if you're a really small company, typically you would start off in a serviced office because you can get monthly, 6-monthly rolling contracts. If you need to expand from a 4-person to a 10-person, you can do that really easily, usually within that building. And I'm going to use WeWork for an example. When you're on then, say, 10 people going on to 20 people, becoming quite a large office, especially if you're going up to 100 then, the cost for a serviced office is usually quite expensive as you start getting into the bigger numbers. And you don't always have all those facilities within your own demise. There are serviced office providers who have their own self-contained floors for those larger companies, but typically you're going to pay a premium for it. And why is that? It's because you're paying for the service charge of the building. WeWork says, oh, you get free beer, free coffee. It's not free. It's included in your service charge, which everyone else is paying for. So it's those little things to look out for. So let's say it's £20,000 for a serviced office for a 20-person office. If you go down the managed route, it's a lot cheaper. Typically, you might be looking at 15 grand. So you're saving 5 grand. It's quite a big chunk of money. That's someone's salary. The more you grow, you then venture into a managed type arrangement. And then when you get to a place of, we know we're going to be at, say, 200 people for the next 20 years, that's when you go, we'll buy a building, or we'll just take on a traditional lease and we need to hire an office manager, because a lot of people think that just going for a traditional lease is cheaper. It's not always, because you're going to have to hire someone to actually carry out the work, to do all the admin. There's so many moving parts when it comes to a traditional lease. There's the rent, the utilities, the Wi-Fi, business rates. Whereas if you go with a managed or a service type arrangement, it's one invoice every single month. Very, very simple. Everything's included.
What do you find are the sort of the top things that tenants typically look for in a flexible or a co-working or even a managed building? What are the things that they're coming to you and saying, Mark, these are like the top 3, top 5 things that we need?
Yeah. Top 3. I'm going to split this into 2. So I'm going to have like the brief versus what people look for upon viewing physically. So the brief has to be location. Location is the most important thing.
Yeah.
And if we're using London specifically as an example, the Lizzie line has become somewhere that is so popular because it's just really easy to commute to, especially for people coming outside of London like Reading, Maidenhead. So location is always the number one. At least a 5-minute walk, at max a 5-minute walk to a major train station. That's not far. If it's above 10-minute walk, most of the people I work with go, it's too far, which is mad. But yeah, location is number 1. Number 2 is flexibility to scale. You don't want to be tied into an agreement, like I said before, which is going to hinder your growth. So if there are offices within the same building for you to move into when you need to, that's really important. Or if not, a clause in your contract saying that you can leave because the office is no longer fit for purpose. So I would say, yeah, flexibility, number 2. And then number 3 is meeting rooms. Oh my God, meeting rooms. Usually, if you are a company of 10 people or more, you should have a meeting room in your office, because it's going to be more financially viable to have it in your office rather than rent them. And if you go to a WeWork, yes, you'll be given X amount of credits. You have to pay hourly for a meeting room, and it can really be quite expensive. So the companies I work with need an office. We need a meeting room in their office. That's on paper the most top 3 important things. When we actually go to view in person, all of that completely goes out the window, because as you'll know, renting or buying a house, you walk in and you go, yeah, this is a vibe. This is really cool. And then that's when you start making compromises. Okay, we don't need a meeting room. Well, we can do a 15-minute walk rather than a 5-minute walk. And so it really is about the vibe, the feel, the natural light in the office, the square foot allocated per person. For example, if you go to an office and it's 30 square foot allocated per person versus 50 square foot allocated per person, it makes a huge difference. You can push your seat back without bumping into someone. You know, you don't want to be working in a fishbowl. You want space to walk around and have a chat with your colleague and not feel claustrophobic. So the actual space is really important.
Yeah. And which providers do you think have really nailed that vibe aspect of having the space presented in a way that makes tenants that you take around say, oh, hey, yeah, I could definitely work out of this place?
I think office space is so competitive now. People are really listening to the demand and adapting, which is good. Or they don't, as I said before, and they just go out of business. But if I can give you some examples, there's a brand called Fora. They are premium, but their office spaces are so nice and so cool.
Yeah.
And some of their buildings, although they are premium, are really cost effective. If you go over to Hammersmith or Shoreditch, some of the areas which people wouldn't usually have an office, but they're still very commutable because most people want to go to Farringdon, King's Cross, Oxford Street, you know, those really core central areas. Well, you could go 20 minutes out to Hammersmith and half your office cost. Fora is really good because of the service that they offer is almost hotel-like. It's incredible. The fit out is so premium, sit-stand desks, loads of natural light coming into all their offices. The paint scheme in their offices are just really nice, Scandi sort of vibes, loads of plants. The coffee, I think they've partnered with Caravan Coffee, so it's like really good quality stuff. Coffee actually goes a really long way. People want to have a decent cup of coffee in their office rather than have to go spend £5 or whatever it is now on a frappadappuccino, whatever is completely stupid.
How do you see that changing based on sort of tenants and their requirements and how, like, because obviously at the very start you said that it's just so unpredictable. How do you think that's going to play out?
Well, I think that the standards are only going to go up, which is good news for everyone. The bad news is that it's going to cost more, but everything is getting more expensive. So it is chaotic, though. You have a lot of providers, I'm not going to, publicly name and shame, but some providers just don't adapt. But they're really cheap. So some companies actually like going for them. I don't want to sound like I'm really contradictory, but what we're basically seeing is that the whole market is completely just going in this direction of really premium, cool spaces. There's always going to be a demand for cheap, not inspiring sort of basement spaces with no natural light. So I think that the direction we're going in it's going to be like stepping into a showroom almost. Some of these spaces that you work, very welcome to come with me and have a look at these spaces. If you come and work from one of these spaces, you're like, oh my God, this is absolutely insane. They have like massage chairs in the corner. There's free everything you want to eat and consume. It's like Soho House. If you know what Soho House is, you've been to one. It's like an all-inclusive. It's really nice inside and it's, hotel-like is the service. I think it's going that way. And there is a standard now that everyone has to adhere to. So in my opinion, I love it because I love these spaces and it's costly. So I'm going to make more commission on it. But what's happened and the reason why the market is so chaotic, I think it's because of COVID. It turned the property market on its head. And for the first time, business owners were asking their employees, what do you want from an office? What does our way of working look like? Before, employees were looked down on. Now I find that the power is in the employees' hands and they go, well, if the office is there, I don't really want to commute to that. Oh, if the office doesn't have really nice natural light, I don't really want to work there. The amount of conversations I have with people who are working in a job that they don't enjoy, but the office is so good and they have an opportunity to move jobs into another office which is completely pants, but the money is better at the other employer. And they decide not to go because the office is so much more enjoyable and they only have to go in 2 to 3 times a week. Their lifestyle's really good. So it's kind of like, do I stay with this job, which, it's okay, but it pays me 10 grand less than the other job? Well, 10 grand actually isn't enough for me to want moving from this great office. I know an office is really, really expensive. It's the biggest outgoing along with staff. It's also the biggest reason to stay with that company because companies are always asking me, how do we create culture in an office? And I always say to them, you can't just create culture. It's made within, but it starts within a physical room. with 4 walls and what's in that room. And how can we design a space that encourages people to talk with each other, have a social life, enjoy meeting with each other? There's a ping pong table, there's great meeting room spaces, there's therapy rooms, there's breakout spaces where people can go for quiet time rather than just an office and you're on the phones all day questioning your life on why you're even working there in the first place, like the old-fashioned jobs which we've all had. That's what I love about office space. It's something that is universally a really boring topic that is now become the forefront of why people should remain at that company, along with why they want to remain there for their own personal career growth and whatever.
Yeah.
It's a very positive subject and a cool place to work. But at some point, and I predict this industry is going to be turned on its head. I don't know when.
Okay.
It's exciting and scary. How am I going to be able to adapt?
In what sense do you think it's going to be turned on its head?
It's going to be too expensive. It's already, I mean, when I entered the industry, the most expensive office space was £1,000 per head.
Yeah.
It's going up by £100 a head per year on average. Yeah. It's astronomically expensive.
Yeah. How do you think businesses should respond to that? Because do they just say, okay, our costs are already too high, we're just going to say, screw it, we'll just work from home? But then that there's a productivity trade-off with that, because I know, having done it myself, how demotivating it can be, because I think there's a natural inclination to want to separate your home life from your work life, right? That makes sense.
There needs to be something on offer for those types of companies, because there's now a divide. You've got people who have an office or they don't. And I would say it's really 50-50. But if you are a high growth company and you want to expand very quickly, usually they do have an office. And I'm not insinuating for one moment that the companies that don't have an office, that's going to make them any worse off. It's what works for them. I work from home. I really miss going into the office and having my staff bounce around each other, and I really want that.
Can that come back? What do you think what's it going to take to bring that back?
It's definitely not lost forever. And if anyone tells you this is what the future is going to look like, they're just completely chatting nonsense. I think this question is really important. Out of everything we've said today, this is really important, because it means saying I don't know is what needs to be said, because it's honest. We don't know what's going to happen, but what we are encouraging is people to keep creating. And that's amazing, because all these spaces are trying to bring out new things and new offerings, but it doesn't solve the problem of what's going to happen in the future. Is going to be too expensive. And I do think there's a gap in the market for an operator to come along and say, I want to offer out office space for those companies that don't want to be in every single day of the week. At the moment, company has to take an office full time, even if they're going to take it 1 day a week. There are providers out there who offer a 1 day per week solution, and you pay for that day. But sometimes it works out more money to do that than to take just a normal lease full time. They price it that way because it's quite a risky business model for the landlord to offer that out. There's so much churn, and they want to have an office space rented out on a full-time basis. So they think, well, we can make more money by renting it out on a day-to-day per basis. It works for the client. But then again, it gets to that point where it's just so expensive and you can't leave your things there overnight. So I feel like that needs to really be looked at. How can that improve to be able to serve the people that work from home but do want to come into an office but can't afford it? And then the companies that, are just in offices already for 1 day a week and paying full price for it.
Well, the only other option is really an increase in hot desking, although that has its own challenges because of the fact you're mixed up. And sometimes businesses don't want to necessarily do that. I've got one more question for you. What's next for Sketch Labs?
The next step for Sketch Labs is really exciting because the companies we're working with are growing so quickly. This year we had the biggest turnover in Q1 purely because our customers are growing so quickly and we grow with them. So it's great knowing that the future is really bright for Sketch, because I'm so happy that these customers are killing it and we kill it as a result of it as well. Love to get an office, have a buzzing environment, but I've done that before. It didn't work for us. We did make more money, but as I said before, we didn't make more profit. So the model we've got at the moment is really smart. We've got an 88% profit margin, which is ridiculous. That's not normal. But the company overheads are literally nothing. So it's just keep on onboarding more clients, keep growing with them, providing a really great service, and just keep those relationships and enjoy it. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I sound so uninspiring, but seriously, if people just try to nail the basics, it's great.
Well, yeah, do what you do best in and you're bound to succeed, right? That's the most important thing. We are unfortunately out of time. So Mark Knops, thanks for joining us and giving us your time.
You're welcome. Thanks, Gary.
To our listeners, thank you for tuning in to Commercial Property Talk. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe for more conversations with leaders across commercial real estate. I'm Gary Clark. See you next time.